The first streaks of light tore through the heavens of Karsoon III like jagged silver claws. The ground trembled beneath the force of their descent, and for a brief moment, the inhabitants of this tranquil world wondered if they were witnessing a cosmic miracle. Was this the arrival of peacekeepers? Or perhaps some benevolent force had heard their prayers, and now they would be saved from the dangers of the galaxy? But as the ships came into focus, massive, impossible vessels that defied the laws of conventional travel, those who stood at the front of the Zarthi Dominion's command post could feel the uneasy tremor of their arrogance begin to crack. The sky darkened as the ships, gleaming in the light of Karsoon's twin suns, painted shadows over the land. The Zarthi had long considered themselves a superior civilization, masters of their sector, capable of folding space and time with their technology, of communicating with thought, of reshaping entire ecosystems with a mere flick of a switch. They believed themselves to be invincible, infallible. That is, until they made the fatal mistake of underestimating humanity. On their home planet, the Zarthi Dominion had watched humanity's rise with a certain smug detachment. The humans had their conflicts, their volatile emotions, yet there was something oddly familiar about them. The Zarthi believed that if they simply offered a guiding hand, the humans would fall in line, like so many lesser species before them. So, they initiated contact, not with diplomacy or peaceful gestures, but with the brute force of superior weaponry and a cold demand: submit or be absorbed. The first ship that arrived over Earth was a towering behemoth, a warship the likes of which humanity had never seen. It hovered in orbit, its massive hull reflecting the blue of Earth below. A transmission came through, a language that resonated in the minds of humanity's leaders. "We are the Zarthi Dominion. We come to offer you integration. You will surrender your world, your technology, your autonomy. In return, you will be spared annihilation." The words were smooth, confident, just like their arrogance. The humans, caught off guard but quick to react, chose defiance over submission. As the first Zarthi emissary ship loomed above Earth, the leadership of the United Terran Confederation responded with swift, calculated decisiveness. There was no panic, no fear, just action. Earth had been preparing for this moment. Humanity had learned from the mistakes of their past, the disasters of war and the fear of extinction. Unlike the Zarthi, humanity did not hide behind facades of unassailable superiority. They knew their own flaws, their own dangers, and they knew how to adapt. Fleet Admiral Mara Thorne stood on the bridge of the Sovereign Blade, gazing out through the massive viewports that showed the vast expanse of space. Her face was as unyielding as the steel of her ship. The Sovereign Blade was not like anything the Zarthi had ever seen before, at least not in person. It was a ship designed not only to survive war, but to wage it with a fury that could shake the foundations of the galaxy. Armed with quantum lances capable of tearing through even the most advanced shields, and surrounded by 35 other warships, each one a titan in its own right, the fleet was a testament to human ingenuity. These ships were the culmination of centuries of trial and error, of bloodshed and loss, and they were about to prove that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. As the Zarthi forces made their descent to Karsoon III, their confidence was palpable. The Dominion had sent several thousand of their finest troops, elite soldiers clad in crystalline armor that could bend light, their minds wired directly into their weapons for unparalleled precision. They landed in the capital city of Zareth, expecting a minor skirmish at most, a few brief skirmishes before the inevitable submission. What they didn't expect was the sudden, overwhelming shift in the balance of power. The first strike came not from the ground, but from space. The Sovereign Blade unleashed its first salvo, a concentrated beam of neutron energy that tore through the sky. The beam illuminated the landscape, cutting through the atmosphere with terrifying precision. In an instant, the Zarthi's first orbital defense array, an imposing fortress high above the planet, was obliterated, reduced to nothing more than a cloud of superheated debris. The humans had adapted their technology in ways the Zarthi could never have imagined. They hadn't just built weapons. They had built weapons designed to overwhelm, to surprise, to destroy. The Zarthi ships, despite their formidable technology, found themselves utterly unprepared for the sheer, unrelenting aggression of humanity's fleet. Admiral Thorne's voice cut through the chaos. "Target their command structures. Disable their ability to communicate. Her orders were cold, efficient. They were the words of someone who had faced death countless times before and emerged victorious. The Sovereign Blade's gravity distortion fields activated, sending shockwaves across the planet's surface, tearing apart entire buildings with the power of artificial black holes. It was a message. Humanity wasn't here to negotiate. They were here to end this threat once and for all. Meanwhile, the Zarthi command center on the planet trembled under the weight of the human assault. The Zarthi commander Vorkak stood on the precipice of despair as his monitors flickered in and out of existence. His fleets, his pride, were falling apart before his eyes. They had not expected the humans to be this relentless. His people had fought wars, yes, but they had never faced an enemy like this. The humans fought not for glory, not for conquest, but because they had been backed into a corner. And when a species like that is pushed, it becomes something far more dangerous than any mere predator. It becomes a force of nature. Vorkak's eyes flicked to the incoming transmission. It was a message from the fleet above. His heart sank as he read the words. Your demand for submission has been noted. Consider this our formal response. The comms were suddenly flooded with static. Then, from the deep silence of space, came the unmistakable hum of weaponized energy. The Zarthi fleet, once so confident, was now nothing more than a floating carcass. The humans had erased them from the skies with a precision that bordered on inhuman. But it wasn't the destruction that unnerved the Zarthi the most. It was the cold, calculated nature of it. There was no pride in this battle, no glory. Only the chilling realization that humanity, with its unyielding will, had the power to destroy them all. On the surface of Qarsoon, the native beings watched in horrified awe. The Zarthi had come to their world as conquerors, but in the blink of an eye, they had become the hunted. Their cities were crumbling beneath the bombardment. Every attempt to retaliate fell short. The air was thick with smoke, and the once beautiful landscapes were being ravaged by the violence of humanity's war machines. The Qarsoonites, who had once held the Zarthi in awe, now found themselves witnesses to an unfolding tragedy they could scarcely comprehend. The Zarthi High Command had already begun transmitting their desperate message to the greater galaxy. Grave error. But it was too late. The humans had already made their mark. The cost of underestimating Earth's potential had just become clear. And as the remnants of the Zarthi fleet fled Qarsoon, the words of Fleet Admiral Thorn echoed in the minds of all who remained. Consider this our formal response. As the last remnants of the Zarthi fleet scattered, some drifting aimlessly through the debris, others desperately plunging toward distant stars in a blind retreat, the humans' victory was becoming a cold, undeniable fact. The high command of the Zarthi Dominion, once filled with self-assured leaders, now found themselves facing a crippling truth. The humans, the very same species they had once dismissed as primitive, disorganized, and chaotic, had decimated their forces with a precision they could neither predict nor understand. The battlefield had been set, but this was not a battle of might alone. This was a battle of strategy, adaptability, and the undeniable fury of a species that refused to be conquered. The victory was not without its cost. Despite their advanced technology, the Zarthi had managed to wound the human fleet, though only superficially. The Sovereign Blade had suffered minor hull damage from a Zarthi counterattack, a failed attempt to disable its quantum communication array. Still, the damage was cosmetic at best. Nothing compared to the devastation the humans had unleashed upon the Zarthi forces. Admiral Thorn watched the data come in from her command station, her eyes scanning the holographic map as her fleet moved into a secure formation. The human ships were like a swarm of wasps, constantly shifting, ever ready to strike. No alien species had ever seen tactics like this before. "Status report," she ordered, her voice steady but sharp. "Minimal damage to the Sovereign Blade and the rest of the fleet, Admiral. Shields held strong. Zarthi forces have been scattered, and their command structure is in complete disarray," her tactical officer replied. "However, we detected a small fleet attempting to regroup at the outer rim. They're headed for the Arctis system, deep within Zarthi-controlled space." "Do they think they can hide from us?" Thorn muttered, her eyes narrowing in disbelief. "They've underestimated us more than once, but it won't happen again." This was no ordinary defeat. The Zarthi had been humbled, their belief in their Invincibility shattered. The intelligence they had gathered about Earth and its people had been completely wrong. The Zarthi had studied human history, watched as they made their first steps into space, and assumed that humanity's early mistakes, their failures, would be their downfall. But the Zarthi had failed to understand the core of humanity's nature. They hadn't counted on the humans' ability to innovate in the face of adversity, their unparalleled capacity for rapid adaptation, and their sheer willpower to overcome the odds. The Zarthi, for all their technological prowess, had not accounted for the humans' one true advantage: their unpredictability. On the Zarthi homeworld, Vorkak stood in the silent, sterile chambers of their war council, his mind clouded by the events that had just unfolded. The Zarthi had always prided themselves on their intellect, their calm, calculated approach to conflict. But now, as he gazed upon the shattered remnants of his forces, he could feel the weight of their failure pressing down on him. The humans had fought like cornered animals, like predators who had learned to fight not for honor or conquest, but for survival. Vorkak had seen the footage: human soldiers operating as a collective unit, communicating with an efficiency that rivaled the most advanced machines. Their ships, designed with a modularity that allowed them to adapt mid-battle, had proven nearly impossible to defeat. Their weapons, though technologically crude compared to the Zarthis, were effective in ways the Zarthi had never anticipated. "I underestimated them," Vorkak admitted, his voice low, a shadow of shame crossing his features. "This will not be easily undone." His second-in-command, Nihilith, spoke with a calculated coldness. "We must regroup, Vorkak. We still have our strength. The Zarthi Dominion cannot fall because of one defeat. We will strike back, perhaps more cautiously this time." Vorkak's thoughts churned. The humiliation of defeat gnawed at him. His people, once proud conquerors of many worlds, had never encountered a species like humanity, resilient, clever, and unforgiving. The Zarthi's vast war machine had faltered against the fury of a species that, until recently, had barely managed to master space travel. He could feel the whispers of doubt creeping into his mind. Was the Zarthi Dominion truly as invincible as they had once believed? Could their technological superiority, their vast fleets and psionic powers, stand up against a species so determined, so relentless in their pursuit of victory? In the heart of the Zarthi warship, the unyielding flame, the silence was deafening. The remnants of the Dominion's fleet began to assemble under its command. But even in the face of this, the energy within the ship had shifted. Crew members who had once stood proud and unshaken now whispered amongst themselves, casting furtive glances toward their commanders, unsure of their future. Back in the human fleet, the celebration was muted. Despite their overwhelming victory, there was no time for relief. The war was far from over. Earth's defenses had just been tested on an unprecedented scale, and the message they had sent to the galaxy was clear. Humanity was not a species to be taken lightly. They were capable of much more than anyone, especially the Zarthi, had ever expected. Fleet Admiral Thorne walked through the corridors of the Sovereign Blade, her mind racing with the implications of what had just occurred. She knew this was just the beginning. The Zarthi would regroup, they would learn, and they would adapt, just as humanity had done over the centuries. But there was something else she understood, something fundamental about the nature of war. The Zarthi had underestimated humanity's capacity to endure. Now, they would pay the price for their arrogance. "Prepare the fleet," she said, her voice carrying a weight of authority. "This war is far from over, and the galaxy will soon know what happens when you make humanity the enemy." As her orders were relayed through the ship's systems, she couldn't shake the feeling that something far greater than a simple victory had been achieved. The humans had proven themselves, against all odds, and now they were standing on the precipice of something larger, something that would reshape the balance of power across the galaxy. The Zarthi were not the only force to be reckoned with. Humanity had arrived. The enemy was not just Zarthi anymore. It was anyone who dared to challenge the will of humanity. The weeks following the battle were a whirlwind of rapid-fire decisions and an accelerated pace of military strategy. On Earth, the significance of the victory over the Zarthi Dominion rippled across the globe. News channels, once concerned only with the geopolitical struggles between Earth's nations, now buzzed with stories of humanity's victory in space. A victory that had sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Yet amid the euphoria of success, there was a deep undercurrent of concern. Humanity had proven its might, but the Zarthi were not easily deterred. They were a relentless species, known for their vast resources, their vast empire stretching across many worlds, and their ability to learn from their mistakes. Earth had made its mark, but the road ahead was fraught with uncertainty. Admiral Thorne knew that they had won a battle, but the war had only just begun. The Zarthi had suffered a devastating blow, but they were not the type to fold under pressure. They would regroup, they would adapt, and they would come back stronger. The human fleet, however, had earned a reputation, one that would make every enemy think twice before engaging. On the Zarthi homeworld, Vorkak paced restlessly in the War Council chambers, his mind a tempest of conflicting thoughts. How had they miscalculated so terribly? The human warships had not only been a technological surprise, but the strategies they employed had been equally baffling. The Zarthi prided themselves on their superior intellect, their ability to predict and control the battlefield. Yet the humans had struck with an unpredictability that they simply couldn't understand. They had fought with a blend of ruthless efficiency and raw, unrelenting ferocity. The humans did not fight to win. They fought to survive. Vorkak's gaze shifted to the glowing holographic map in front of him. It showed the fragmented remains of the Zarthi fleet, scattered across the vast reaches of the galaxy. Some ships had returned to the heart of Zarthi space for repairs, while others, those too heavily damaged to make the journey, drifted in the cold abyss of deep space, their once proud forms now lifeless. The damage inflicted on the Zarthi forces was beyond anything they had ever experienced. The loss of so many ships, so many warriors, had shaken their entire command structure. "We underestimated them," Vorkak muttered, more to himself than to anyone else in the room. His second-in-command, Nylith, stood across from him, her cold, calculating eyes locked onto him. "And yet, we cannot afford to be weak," she replied, her voice sharp with authority. "The humans have proven themselves capable of striking with incredible force, but they are still just one species. We have the resources, the allies, the ships. We can recover from this setback. The question is, how do we deal with them?" Vorkak's eyes narrowed. The Zarthi had prided themselves on their superiority. For centuries their empire had been unchallenged, their fleets unmatched. And yet now, for the first time in their history, they were faced with a species that had turned the tables on them, leaving them reeling. "We need to understand them," Vorkak said, a slow realization dawning. "We cannot just fight them with brute force. We need to find their weaknesses. We need to learn how to predict their moves, how to control the battlefield." Nylith nodded in agreement, though there was a trace of skepticism in her expression. "We've already begun gathering intelligence on their tactics. They use unorthodox strategies. No patterns, no predictable behaviors. How do we counter that?" The answer came to Vorkak in a sudden, unsettling flash of insight. "We can't predict them. We have to become like them." Nylith tilted her head in confusion. "You mean we fight unpredictably? With chaos?" Vorkak's expression hardened as he stepped away from the holographic map, his mind racing. "Yes, the humans didn't win because they were smarter than us. They won because they were willing to throw everything into the fire, no matter the cost. They used tactics we would never consider. We can't just think like them. We have to become like them." The Zarthi Dominion had long relied on careful planning, meticulous strikes, and the overwhelming power of their superior numbers. But the humans had shown them a different approach. In the heat of battle, they had adapted on the fly, using tactics that were almost random, shifting with every move. Their ships, designed to be modular and flexible, had the ability to reconfigure in response to changing combat conditions. Their soldiers, though outnumbered, fought with a desperation that turned the tide in even the most dire situations. It wasn't just their technology. It was their willpower, their determination, their refusal to give up in the face of certain defeat. The humans had done something the Zarthi had never anticipated. They had fought with the raw, unfiltered spirit of a species that had just begun to explore the stars. They had no ancient war traditions, no centuries of military doctrine to follow. They were a species of innovators, survivalists, and thinkers, traits that the Zarthi had underestimated. As Vorkak continued to deliberate, the hum of his thoughts was interrupted by a flicker of light in the corner of the room. His eyes snapped toward the source, a communication channel from one of the Zarthi's largest warships, the Unyielding. Flame. The hologram flickered to life, revealing a senior strategist standing before him, looking worn and fatigued. Vorkak, the strategist said, his voice tinged with urgency. We have more troubling news. The humans have made their move. Vorkak's eyes narrowed. What move? The strategist hesitated, then spoke, his words heavy with the weight of impending disaster. They've already begun to regroup. They're mobilizing an even larger fleet. And we've detected an unknown signature, something we've never seen before. They've found something. We don't know what. But it's something that could change everything. Vorkak's mind raced. The humans had only begun to fight, and now they were already preparing for something bigger. They had learned the tactics of war in mere months, but it was clear that they were not content with merely defending themselves. They were preparing for a campaign that would take them deep into the heart of Zarthi space. As the transmission ended, Vorkak turned to Nylith, his expression grave. We have no time to waste. The humans are coming. And this time, we'll be ready for them. The Zarthi Dominion had underestimated humanity's resolve. But in this game of galactic chess, the humans were no longer the pawns. They were the kings, and the universe was their battleground. The stars shifted as the Resolute Dawn, Earth's most advanced deep space battleship, slipped through the edge of Zarthi-claimed territory. It moved like a predator through the cosmic ocean, its hull a gleaming black composite that bent light, its systems silent, and its engines muffled through electromagnetic cloaking. Inside, a crew of only 150 monitored thousands of processes. In perfect synchronicity, their bodies augmented by neural implants and AI-guided interfaces. The humans were not just exploring anymore, they were hunting. Admiral Thorne stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The board was alive with shifting vectors, pulses of energy signatures, and blinking signals of interest. Every piece of data was fed through the warship's integrated AI, Argus, named for the many-eyed guardian of myth. But unlike myths, Argus didn't sleep, and its eyes pierced every corner of the void. What had started as reconnaissance had evolved into something far more significant: discovery. Sensors had picked up something weeks earlier, an anomalous structure buried within the remnants of an ancient battlefield. The region, nicknamed the Ghost Ring, was avoided by most galactic travelers. The wreckage of forgotten wars floated silently there, a graveyard of forgotten civilizations, metal tombs turning endlessly through space. But in this graveyard, humanity had found something, buried deeper, beneath the surface of a planetoid that bore no name. Thorne's voice echoed across the command deck. Bring us into orbit. I want a full scan of the surface. Deep layer, geological, and subatomic. If this is what I think it is, it changes everything. Within moments, the warship's scanners peeled back the surface like skin, probing layer after layer of rock and metal until something took shape. A buried construct, hexagonal, nearly 10 kilometers in diameter. It pulsed faintly with residual energy, a frequency so alien that even Argus had trouble categorizing it. But one thing was clear. It wasn't Zarthi. It was older. Far older. Dr. Ilani Reyes, a xenotech specialist and one of the foremost minds on ancient galactic structures, stood awestruck in the lab deck. This is not Zarthi, she whispered, her breath fogging the cold surface of her data console. This predates them, possibly by millions of years. Thorne joined her, staring at the rotating 3D projection of the subterranean construct. It pulsed softly like a heart, quiet but alive. Then what the hell is it? He asked. Reyes tapped through layers of spectral data. I don't know yet. But whatever it is, it's responding to us, our presence, our energy, maybe even our thoughts. I think it's an autonomous construct, a remnant from a civilization that knew how to manipulate subspace at a level we can barely begin to comprehend. There was a long pause. The implications hung heavy in the room. If the Zarthi had been surprised by Earth's current capabilities, what would happen if humanity gained access to something far beyond either empire's understanding? Meanwhile, On the Zarthi homeworld, the atmosphere had grown tense. Reports from forward scouts indicated movement in the Ghost Ring, and every attempt to jam or interfere had failed. Vorkak sat once more in his war chamber, glaring at the reports. The humans had uncovered something, and it was beyond anything the Zarthi Dominion had predicted. Worse, their own ships that attempted to approach the region had gone dark, vanished without a trace. Something out there didn't just defend itself, it erased threats from existence. Nylith entered, her expression grim. We've confirmed. It. The humans are excavating an ancient vault. We believe it's a precursor relic. The term alone sent a ripple of unease through the room. The precursors were a mystery in every recorded archive. Beings or entities from the early epochs of the galaxy who had seemingly vanished, leaving behind only cryptic artifacts, dangerous technologies, and void anomalies that defied physics. Most believed they were myth. But if humanity had found something real, tangible, the balance of power was about to shift irreversibly. Do we strike? Nylith asked, already knowing what it would mean. Vorkak leaned forward, resting clawed hands on the table. Not yet. If we attack blindly, we risk setting off whatever protective systems that Relic has. We wait, we observe. And if the humans try to weaponize it, then we make sure they don't leave that region alive. But back aboard the Resolute Dawn, things were accelerating quickly. A boarding crew descended to the surface in a heavily shielded landing module. Reyes led the team, her voice a blend of scientific awe and cautious control. The structure was immense, its entrance shaped like an inverted obelisk carved into the rock. Symbols, etched in a script that shimmered and shifted, lined the interior. The walls seemed to bend space, making distances seem shorter or longer than they were. Gravity fluctuated and time itself felt thicker. As they approached the core, a sudden pulse of energy radiated outward, not destructive, but deeply intrusive. Each member of the team felt a presence, like something watching them from the edges of their consciousness. Reyes dropped, to her knees, clutching her head. Images flooded her mind. Stars, galaxies, wars that had happened eons ago, beings of light and shadow. A universe that had once been ruled not by empires, but by ideas. Living, sentient concepts that shaped matter and time with mere thought. It passed as quickly as it came, but the message was clear. Their warning. Us, Reyes said as she stood, shaken. Or inviting us. I'm not sure which. Thorn watched the data feed from the ship. The readings defied every known scientific principle. This relic was not a weapon. It was a gate. A gate to knowledge. Or perhaps to somewhere else. Somewhere no living species had dared to step in millennia. And humanity, bold, reckless, and endlessly curious, was already reaching for the handle. The Resolute Dawn was no longer just a warship. It had become a living thing, a vessel forged, from human ingenuity, but now bound to something much older, much more enigmatic. As the crew continued their descent toward the heart of the ancient precursor structure, the tension aboard the ship mounted. The Zarthi, their warships orbiting just outside the Ghost Ring, were waiting. They didn't know what had been uncovered, but they knew humanity's relentless thirst for knowledge had just turned a corner that might not be reversible. Captain Thorn stood at the ship's command center, his face illuminated by the cool, eerie glow of the tactical displays. His eyes flickered briefly to the giant, rotating holographic image of the precursor construct, now revealed in all its terrifying complexity. The vault, with its alien architecture and shimmering, impossible geometry, was a dark enigma. What had begun as a simple exploration had evolved into the greatest discovery in human history. But with it came a profound danger. Thorn, Dr. Reyes said, her voice trembling, though she worked hard to keep it steady. I'm seeing something. It's beginning to interface with us. The signals are getting more complex. I think it's aware. Of us. He turned to her, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Aware of us? He repeated, his tone betraying both awe and fear. What the hell do you mean? Not just the crew, she said, pulling up a live feed of the interface between the ship's AI, Argus, and the precursor relic. It's reading our thoughts, and it's responding in kind. Not through language, but through... She paused, visibly struggling to comprehend the data. Through patterns, It's like it's sharing ideas with us, concepts we can't fully process. Yet, her words faltered, as if she were trying to grasp something too vast for her mind. I'm seeing things. Before Thorn could respond, the ground beneath them shook violently. A deep, rumbling pulse emanated from the core of the precursor structure. It wasn't an explosion, more like a ripple in reality itself. The entire structure seemed to groan as if it were alive, stretching and contracting. The sky above them darkened, and a strange, unsettling silence fell over the crew. "Everyone! Brace for impact!" Thorn commanded, his voice tight with urgency. The ship's AI, sensing the anomaly, quickly initiated emergency protocols. Energy shields flared to life, protecting them from the shockwave that threatened to tear the warship apart. Outside, the battle between humanity and the Zarthi escalated. The Zarthi fleets, in a fit of panic and aggression, unleashed a barrage of weaponry, their ships opening fire on the Resolute Dawn. But this was no ordinary warship, no vulnerable target. The Resolute Dawn responded in kind. Its advanced AI-guided systems activated the pulse cannons, and the ship's electromagnetic shielding absorbed the oncoming fire, turning the energy against its attackers. With a roar that shook the very fabric of space, the Resolute Dawn retaliated, unleashing a devastating series of pulses that tore through the Zarthi formation. What happened next defied every expectation. The Zarthi ships didn't just explode, they seemed to disintegrate, as though reality itself was bending around the impact. Pieces of alien warships dissolved into particles, scattering across the vacuum. The Zarthi forces, stunned and confused, attempted to regroup. But it was clear. This was no ordinary battle. Humanity had unlocked something beyond their comprehension, and the Zarthi were paying the price for underestimating them. Back inside the ancient precursor structure, Reyes continued her work, barely able to focus through the chaos. This is not just a relic. It's a weapon, a super weapon. But it's not something that just destroys. It's something that manipulates space itself. It's rewriting the rules of physics in real time, reshaping the battlefield. Thorn clenched his fists, the weight of their discovery pressing on him. So what now? What do we do with this power? For the first time, Reyes looked at him with fear in her eyes. We don't control it. Not yet. This thing, it's alive, Thorn. It's sentient, or at least it was. If we try to force it, if we push too hard. She stopped, as if trying to fathom the consequences. We may not survive. But if we understand it, we could reshape the entire galaxy. Her words hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. They had discovered a precursor weapon, a relic of unimaginable power. But in the wrong hands, alien or human, it could devastate entire civilizations. The Zarthi knew that better than anyone, which was why they were relentless in their pursuit of the Resolute Dawn. And as powerful as humanity was becoming, the price of wielding such a force was one they hadn't fully calculated. Thorn's gaze hardened. We won't let them have it, but we won't destroy it either. This is our future, and if we're going to survive in this galaxy, we need to be the ones in control. Just as he spoke those words, the holographic image of the precursor construct flared to life one final time, filling the bridge with an overwhelming, brilliant light. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The Zarthi ships frozen in mid-combat, the crew aboard the Resolute Dawn, even the vast expanse of space outside. They were all suspended in time. And then, with a single final pulse, the light blinked. Out! Silence. Thorn didn't know what had just happened, but as he looked at the screens, he saw something far more important than he could have imagined. The Zarthi had fled. Humanity had won. Not just a battle, but the war for control over the most powerful weapon the galaxy had ever known. The Resolute Dawn hung in the void, its crew battered but unbroken. Around them, the remnants of the Zarthi. Fleet drifted, destroyed, disintegrated, their technological superiority shattered. Humanity had done it. They had unlocked the greatest secret of the universe, and they had done so on their own terms. Admiral Thorn, standing tall on the bridge, looked out at the stars. The future, as vast and unknowable as it was, now belonged to humanity. And whatever came next, they would face it together. With this new power, with this ancient knowledge, The galaxy had just learned what it meant to challenge humanity. The Zarthi may have regretted first contact, but the universe had only just begun to feel the weight of humanity's arrival. If you enjoyed this epic adventure, be sure to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think humanity would do with such power? Would we use it wisely, or would it consume us? Let us know your ideas, and don't forget to share the story with those who crave galactic battles and cosmic mysteries.